Good morning, students. So welcome you to another session. So let's begin today's session. So in the previous session, we have started discussing about the alimentary canal in case of the human digestive system. So we have begun with the first part of the alimentary canal, which is the buccal cavity. And in the buccal cavity, if I'm not wrong, I remember we have started discussing about the first few parts, which is the palate. We have completed with the palate, and then we spoke about the teeth part, right? So we had a brief introduction with regards to the teeth, right? So today, let's continue with what we have started off in the previous class. So we have started with the teeth. So let's finish off with the teeth and then get into the remaining parts of the alimentary canal for today, right? So let's begin today's session by taking up the structure of the human tooth, right? So in the previous session, we have seen a few things with regards to the teeth, right? So we said that the different types of dentitions, which is actually shown by the human teeth, right? So we said that human teeth is said to be diphyodont dentition. So they are said to be heterodont dentition, and they are also said to be picodont dentition, right? So all these things we have seen, and then we have also taken up with a few things with regards to the dental formula also. So dental formula of milk teeth we have taken up, the dental formula of the permanent teeth also we have taken up in the previous session, right? So today, let's take up the structure of human tooth. Right? Now talking about the human tooth, we know that human teeth is said to be thecodont in dentition, right? So what do we mean by thecodont dentition? If the teeth are embedded in the sockets of the jaw bone, we said that it is thecodont dentition. So here, the human teeth are actually said to be firmly embedded in the sockets, right? Those sockets we usually call it as alveoli, right? So in the alveolar sockets of the jaw bone, we have the teeth firmly being embedded inside. So let us see how exactly it is being embedded. So for that, let us first draw the jaw bone, or rather, the entire teeth would be first classified into three regions. Then we take out the diagram. So there are three regions of the bone, of the teeth. The first region is called the crown part of the teeth. The crown is what we actually see. The white part of the teeth is nothing but the crown, what we actually see towards the top. The second one, or the second region of the tooth, is called the neck region. So the neck region of the tooth is the one which is said to be attached with that of the gums, right? So the part of the teeth which is actually attached to the gums, we would start calling it as the neck of the teeth. And the third one would be the root of the teeth. So the root of the tooth is the one which is actually said to be embedded inside the sockets of the jawbone. So let us first take up that. So let us understand all of these three parts again. Say if this is the bone what we are doing, right? So this would be the jawbone, and here would be the socket, which is nothing but the alveolar socket, right? So all this would be the bone here. Now since the tooth is embedded in this socket, so called the alveoli, we would start actually calling this bone as the alveolar bone, right? Alveolar bone. So in the alveolar bone, there is this space which is called as the socket or the alveoli, into which the teeth is actually said to be embedded. So let us see how exactly the teeth is fitted into this particular part. Right, so this is how the teeth is actually said to be fitted into. Right, so exactly in the sockets of the jaw bone, we have the tooth actually being placed. Now let us see the different parts of the tooth that is actually being present. So here we would have the gums, right? So this would be the gums, which is attached to that of the teeth and the alveolar bone, right? So we said three parts of the teeth, right? The crown, the neck, and the root. So which is the crown? The crown is this part what we can actually see, right? So the first part of the tooth is the one what we can see, and that part is actually called as the crown part of it, right? So this would be the crown, the first part of the tooth that we can actually see. The next one, we said that it is a neck region. So neck is nothing but the small part which is actually said to be fixed in the gums. So this is the gums here, and this part of the teeth that is actually fit into the gums. Right? So this part of the teeth that is fit into the gums So we would start calling it as the neck region, the second region. And the third one is the root. Root, I said, the one which is said to be completely embedded inside the sockets of the jawbone. We would start calling it as the root. So this entire region here, we would start calling it as the root. Now, at the base of the root, we see two openings being present. Right? So at the base of the tooth, we see the two openings that are being present. So these openings that are present at the base of the tooth, we would start calling it as the apical foramen. It is called the apical foramen. Right? So this is what we have the regions of the tooth. So three different regions of the tooth. The crown, the neck, as well as the root, and the openings at the base of the root, we would start calling it as the apical foramen. Now, we have understood the three regions. Where exactly are these three regions being present? Now, let us get into the internal part of the root. This is the external part of the root, external part of the tooth. So now let's get into the internal part of the tooth. Talking about the internal part of the tooth, or the internal structure of the root again has three layers being present. Right? So there are three layers: outer layer, the middle layer, as well as the inner layer. So first, let us take up with the outer layer. The outer layer of the tooth. Right, the outer layer of the tooth is called as the enamel. So this is the outer layer of the tooth. Now this enamel, which is the outer layer of the tooth, is usually seen only in the crown region. Right, it is seen only in the crown region. So where do we have this? So this is the crown region. So from here we would have this part being the enamel part. Right. So all this would be the first part, or the outermost layer, which is called the enamel part. Now, this enamel is said to be the hardest substance that is present in the human body. So, a few things we can simultaneously take down with regards to the enamel, right? So, enamel is said to be the hardest substance. Now, when we say hardest substance, we are calling it a substance and not the cell, right? Because it is a non-living part, right? So, the white, shiny part of the tooth, which is present towards the topmost part, which is nothing but the crown region, is called as the enamel. And this is said to be the most hardest substance that is actually present in our body, and that substance is actually called as enamel. Now, how exactly is this enamel being formed? So, few things what you need to remember. Enamel is actually said to be ectodermal in origin, right? It is derived from the germ layer called ectoderm. So it is ectodermal in origin. Right? It is said to be ectodermal in origin. It is derived from the germ layer called as ectoderm. Now, along with that, there are certain specialized cells which are responsible for secreting this substance, which is called as enamel. And those specialized cells, we will start calling them as amyloblasts. So amyloblast cells are the ones which are responsible for secreting this particular substance called as enamel. Now, what exactly is this enamel made up of? Right. So enamel is actually made up of something called as calcium phosphate. It is composed of calcium phosphate. Let's see. It is made up of calcium phosphate as well as some fluorides. Right? So the enamel is composed of calcium salts, mostly the calcium phosphates as well as the fluorides. So both calcium phosphates as well as fluorides are required for the formation of this outermost substance, the hardest substance, the toughest substance, which is called as the enamel. Right. Now, in some cases, you would have seen that whenever there is excess of fluorides present in the water that we drink, those excess of fluorides will start damaging the enamel. Right, you have to start. Fluorides are actually required for the proper formation of enamel. But again, only a proper concentration or normal concentration is required. If that concentration exceeds, at that point of time, it would lead to the damage of the enamel. And that damage of the enamel, we would actually start calling it as mottling of the teeth. Right, so we would actually start calling it as mottling of the teeth. So mottling of the teeth is because of excess of fluorides that is present in the water that we actually drink, which can lead to the damage of the enamel, and most of the cases it would lead to the fall off of the enamel as well. Right. So this is the first layer what we have, which is called the enamel, which is the outermost layer, and it is said to be the most strongest or the toughest layer or the hardest layer that is present in our body, hardest substance that is present in the body, right? And it is said to be ectodermal in origin. Right. So this is the first layer. Then inner to the enamel, there is another layer which is present, and that layer is called as the dentine. So the second layer would be called the dentine. Where do we have this layer, the dentine? Dentine is the one which is actually present, right, throughout, right? It is present throughout, right? A few things we'll first write down about dentine, then we'll get into the location where exactly it is being present. Now, dentine is also said to be a hard substance, but not as hard as that of the enamel, right? Dentine is said to be mesodermal in origin. Right, it is said to be mesodermal in origin. So enamel we have said it is ectodermal in origin. Dentine is said to be mesodermal in origin. Now, enamel we said that it is made up of specialized cells called as the amyloblast, whereas dentine is composed of certain specialized cells which are called as the odontoblast. Right, so the odontoblast cells are the ones which are responsible for the formation of this dentine layer, the middle layer of the inner part of the tooth, what we can say. Right. Now, what is this dentine made up of? Here in case of enamel, we said that enamel is made up of calcium phosphate as well as fluoride. Here also the same. Dentine is also made up of calcium salts. Right. So dentine is also composed of calcium salt. Now again, just like enamel, dentine is also said to be the non-living part. That's the reason why again we are calling it as a substance rather than a tissue or the cell. Right. Now let us see where exactly do we have. First, let us draw the cells or odontoblast, and then we'll see where exactly they are present. Right. Now these are the odontoblast what we have. Right. So all these would be the odontoblast cells. These are the odontoblast cells. Now, surrounding the odontoblast, we have the we have the dentine layer actually being present. So, all this would be the dentine layer, right? So, this entire region here, starting from the root till the top part of it, we have the dentine being present. So, all this would be the dentine. Right, so this would be the second layer, which is called the dentine. Right, so this is how the dentine is actually being present. Right, so dentine, mesodermal in origin, composed of cells called as specialized cells called as the odontoblast. So let us start in that also. So these cells here would be the odontoblast. So these odontoblasts are the ones which are responsible for the secretion of this layer, which is called as the dentine, and it is again composed of calcium salts. Right. So this is the second part what we have, which is called the dentine. Now, enamel and dentine both are said to be the non-living part of the tooth. Right. So both of them are said to be the non-living part of the tooth. Now, moving on to the third part, and the third one is the living part of the tooth. Right. The third one would be called the pulp. Right, the third one is the pulp. Now, where do we have the pulp? The entire innermost layer, all this would actually be the pulp. Right, so all this would be the innermost layer, which is called the pulp region. Right, so entire thing would be actually referred to as the pulp. Now, this pulp is the only living part of the tooth. Right, so because it is living part, pulp is composed of the connective tissue. Right, so there is connective tissue present in the pulp, right, and along with that there are blood vessels being present, and along with the blood vessels there are also the nerves being present, right, or the nerve fibers are being present. So pulp, because it is a living part of the tooth, it has the connective tissue, it has the blood vessels as well as the nerves. They have the nerves. So here we can actually show those, right? So let us assume that these are the nerve fibers which are present, the ones which are in blue, right? So these would be the nerves. Along with nerves, there would be also these blood vessels also which would be radiating. So all of them would arise actually from the apical foramen. So this would be the blood vessels which actually radiate from the apical foramen. right? So this is the living part of the tooth, which is actually called as the pulp. Now, this is what we have with the three different regions of the root, that is three different regions of the tooth, that is the crown, the neck, and the root, and three different layers of the inner part of the tooth, which is called the enamel, the dentine, as well as the pulp, which is present in the pulp cavity. Now, things what you need to remember: enamel is said to be ectodermal in origin. Dentine is said to be mesodermal in origin. Enamel made up of specialized cells called amyloblast. Dentine is composed of specialized cells called as the odontoblast. And these two are the non-living part of the tooth. The only living part of the tooth is nothing but the pulp, which contains the blood vessels, the nerve fibers, as well as the connective tissue. Now, last one more thing here. Connecting the or attaching the tooth to the bone or to the sockets of the jawbone, there is a cementing substance that is actually being present. So here we would have this cementing substance that is actually being present. Now, this cementing substance, which is actually present between the sockets of the jawbone as well as the tooth, is the one which would start holding the tooth firmly in its place, right? So this would be called the cementing substance. Right, so this cementing substance is the one which would hold the tooth in its place in the sockets of the jaw. Right, so this is what we have with the structure of the human tooth in brief. Right, so clear this, right? So three different regions as well as three different layers in the structure of the human tooth. Right, so with this we have completed with the second part of the buccal cavity. So the first part of the buccal cavity, what we discussed was the palate. The second part of the buccal cavity, what we have taken up here, is with regards to the teeth part of it. Right. Now, the third structure, which is a part of the buccal cavity, is the one what we have, which is called as the tongue. So let us take up a few things with regards to the tongue, and then we'll proceed with the next part. Now, talking about the tongue in case of humans, right? The human tongue is actually said to be made up of specialized muscles, which are called as the skeletal muscles, right? So here we have started with the buccal cavity. So we have started off with the buccal cavity, and in the buccal cavity, the first one what we have taken up is the palate. The second one what we have completed is the teeth, and the third one what we are going to take up now is the tongue. So talking about the tongue now. So as I've said, tongue is actually said to be a muscular structure that is present in the body, right? So in the buccal cavity, when we say it is a muscular structure, it is composed of the skeletal muscles. Again, of an important thing what you need to remember. Even though it is composed of skeletal muscles, it is not attached to any of the bone. Because we know that what we mean by skeletal muscles, the muscle which is actually said to be attached to the bone, we usually call it as a skeletal muscle. Right? That's the reason why we use the term skeletal muscle. Right? But only exception here is with the tongue, where there is no bone which would support this particular tongue. But again, the lower part of the tongue, the posterior end of the tongue, would again be attached to something called as a filamentous structure called frenulum, and that would again be attached to another bone called the hyoid bone, what we actually have in the face region. Right. So apart from that, there is no other bone which would actually support this particular structure on the tongue. Right. Now, if we just have a structure of the tongue, or if we have, or we can put it this way. Anterior part of the tongue is actually said to be free. Okay, we can just make a note of it. The first one is the tongue is composed of skeletal muscles. Right, it is composed of the skeletal muscles. Second one, right, next one. The tongue is said to be free towards the anterior end, and towards the posterior end, it is said to be attached with that of the buccal cavity. Right. So it is attached to the buccal cavity with the help of a filamentous structure or a membranous structure, which is called as the frenulum. So frenulum is the one which would actually attach the tongue, right, the posterior end of the tongue to the buccal cavity, and this structure is actually referred to as the frenulum. Now let us take up with the structure of the tongue, and we'll see what exactly are present on the tongue. So if we have to talk about the structure of the tongue, it usually appears to be somewhat like this. Right? So this is how it is actually appearing. Right? So this is how we would actually have the tongue, the structure of the tongue. Now on this tongue, right, on this tongue, there are some sort of ridges which are being present. Right? So there are some sort of ridges present on the tongue. And those ridges we would actually start calling it as the papillae, right? The human tongue is not a smooth surface, right? There are some sort of ridges which are being present, and those structures we would actually start calling it as papillae. There are basically three types of papillae present on the human tongue, right? Three types of papillae. So let us see what are those three types of papillae that are being present. The first type of papillae that is present on the human tongue, it is called the circumvallate papillae. Circumvallate papillae. So in most of the places it will just be simply written as the vallate papillae, or we can also start calling it as the circumvallate papillae. Now this circumvallate papillae are said to be the largest papillae that are present, right? So they are said to be the largest in size and few in number. Largest in size and few in number. Now when we say they are few in number, their number usually ranges from around 8 to 12 or 8 to 10, right? So this is the number what they have, right? So very few in number, largest papillae among the three different types of papillae, and they are very few in number, usually ranging from 8 to 10 in number. Right. Now, structure-wise, if we talk about these papillae, they are said to be spherical, right? They are said to be spherical in shape, and they are arranged in a unique manner, right? So the arrangement is said to be in an inverted V shape and towards the posterior end of the tongue, right? So where are these papillae being present? They are present towards the posterior end of the tongue, that is very close to the frenulum part of it, right? And they are arranged in an inverted V shape, and they are said to be largest and very few in number. So let us see how they are actually arranged here. So here towards the posterior end, so this is the anterior part, this is the posterior part, which is actually said to be attached to the frenulum part, right? Now here we would have this structure here like this, arranged almost like this, inverted V shape. So these are the papillae what we are talking about, which is called the circumvallate papillae. Now these circumvallate papillae, they are actually said to be arranged in a groove-like structure, right? So if this is a groove, what we have, right? So inside the groove, we would have the circumvallate papillae actually arranged like this, right? So inside the groove, on the walls of the groove, right? So on the walls of the groove, that is this particular part, the taste buds are actually being present, right? So the taste buds are actually present right around the circumvallate papillae in the grooves in which the circumvallate papillae are actually being placed, right? So this is the first type of papillae what we have, which is called the circumvallate papillae. Talking about the second type of papillae. The second type of papillae is called the fungiform papillae. Right? So we would actually start calling it as the fungiform papillae. Now, these fungiform papillae are moderate in size, and the number is also said to be moderate, not high or not very less or not very low, right? Or sorry, not very less or not too high. The number is also said to be in moderate number, and their size also is said to be moderate. Now, structure-wise, if we see the fungiform papillae, these fungiform papillae, they appear in the form of a mushroom, right? So they are said to be mushroom-like in shape, right? Mushroom-like, and that's the reason why they have been called as the fungiform papillae. So when we say mushroom-like, so it usually appears to be somewhat like this, right? So this is how the fungiform papillae is actually appearing. So their circumvallate papillae, they were said to be spherical in shape, and here they are said to be somewhat mushroom shaped, and that's the reason why we actually start calling it as the fungiform papillae. Now, what is the location of this papillae? Fungiform papillae is actually present towards the margins of the tongue, right? So they are actually present on the margins of the tongue. Now, when we say margins, where do we have it? So all here we would have the fungiform papillae being present. So all this here would be the fungiform papillae. So all these would be the fungiform papillae, right, which is actually present. So this one would be the second one, which is called the fungiform papillae. The fungiform papillae. The third type of papillae, what we have is called the third one, which is called the filiform papillae. And again, remember, fungiform papillae also have the taste buds. So taste buds is present in the circumvallate papillae as well as the fungiform papillae. The third one, what we have is called the filiform papillae. Now, talking about the filiform papillae. So, filiform papillae are said to be the smallest and more in number. Right? So, they are said to be the smallest and more in number. Now, where they are present? They are present throughout the tongue. Right? Circumvallate papillae, we said that they are present towards the posterior end of the tongue. Fungiform papillae, we said that they are present towards the margins of the tongue, whereas the filiform papillae, they are actually present throughout the tongue. Now, what is the shape of this? Shape is said to be inverted V shape, right? So, inverted V shape. So, this is the shape of this particular filiform papillae. Now, where exactly do we have it? So, all here would be the filiform papillae that is actually being present. So, this is inverted V shape. Right, so here everywhere we would have this filiform papillae being present, and that's the reason why we are saying they are maximum in number and they are said to be the smallest papillae. So this would be the filiform papillae. Right, so three different types of papillae. What we have. One important thing again, what we need to remember here is filiform papillae do not have any taste buds. Right, so there are no taste buds present in the filiform papillae. Taste buds are present only in the circumvallate as well as the fungiform papillae. Now, this is what we have in the different papillae that have actually been present on the tongue region. Now, what is the functions of the tongue? So let us take up with the functions of the tongue. The first function of the tongue is, right? So talking about the functions here. So talking about the functions of the tongue, the first function what we can say is these are responsible, or they start acting as a gustatory receptors, right? Because of the presence of the taste buds being present, right? So they have this taste related receptors, which we call it as a gustatoreceptors. So because of the presence of gustatoreceptors, tongue is the one which is responsible for the perception of taste. Now, there are four different types of taste buds present on the tongue. So let us quickly see where those taste buds are present. And remember, taste buds are present throughout the tongue. But these four different types of taste buds are present in few areas of the tongue where there is maximum taste buds being present. So let us see where exactly those taste buds are present. The first one, it is present at the tip of the tongue. So here we will have one taste bud being present. So the taste bud that is present here is responsible for perception of sweet. Right? So sweet related taste buds, they are present throughout the tongue, but maximum taste buds for sweet is actually present here at the tip or the base of the tongue, or at the towards the anterior part of the tongue. Second taste bud, we would actually have it here, so right here, right? And these taste buds are actually responsible for perception of salt, right? And the third taste bud would be present somewhere here. And these taste buds here, they are responsible for sour. And the fourth taste bud would actually be present somewhere here. Right, so these were the taste buds. And these taste buds are here, they are responsible for bitter. Right. So as I've already said, throughout the tongue, the taste buds are being distributed. But maximum taste buds are for a particular taste is actually located in these particular. So maximum taste buds for sweet, they are located here. Maximum taste buds for salt here. Maximum taste bud for sour, and maximum for taste buds for bitter. They are located in these particular regions. But again, as I said, maximum or what we can say, there is complete distribution of taste buds throughout the tongue. So this is the first function of the tongue. So they have the taste buds. Because of that, we would start calling it as a gustatoreceptors. Second function of the tongue would be, tongue is responsible for mixing of the food. Mixing of food in the buccal cavity with that of saliva. Right? So it is responsible for mixing of the food in the buccal cavity with that of the saliva. So this is the second function of the tongue what we have. So first one, gustatoreceptors, they are responsible for perception of taste. Second one, tongue is also responsible for mixing of the food with the saliva, as a result of which a structure called bolus is actually being formed in the buccal cavity because of the activity of the saliva as well as the tongue together. The third one, tongue is also responsible for articulation of speech. Articulation of speech. Now, what does this actually mean? If we have to pronounce a few words, we require tongue, right? Only if the tongue is present, those words will be able to pronounce those particular words, especially the words starting with T, right? T letters, right? So if you have to pronounce or if you have to give out those words called as T, if you have to talk about those words, we require tongue. So whenever we have to give out those word T, what we have to do, the tongue should be hardly pushed towards the palate. Only then the T sound will actually come out of the buccal cavity. So for the pronunciation or for articulation of speech, again, we require the tongue. Tongue plays a very important role. And one more function what we can take up is, in the tongue, there are some tonsils which are being present, right? There are some sort of tonsils which are present. What we actually start calling them as the lingual tonsils. Lingual tonsils. So wherever we have the term lingual, it is something related to the tongue. So there are some sort of tonsils which are present even in the tongue also, what we start calling them as the lingual tonsils. Now these lingual tonsils, they start acting as a secondary lymphoid organ, so we know about that very well. So they start acting as a secondary lymphoid organ, and therefore they are involved in the activation of the B lymphocytes. So therefore they play a role in defense mechanism. Okay, right? So these are the four major functions of the tongue what we have. The taste buds, it is responsible for mixing of the food with the saliva. It is involved in the articulation of speech, and also there are these lingual tonsils which are being present, and because of the presence of these lingual tonsils, they are also involved in the defense mechanisms. Right? So this is what we have a few things with regards to the third part of the buccal cavity, which is called as the tongue. Okay. Now let's move on to the next part of the buccal cavity what we have. So the next part of the buccal cavity what we're going to take up is with regards to something called as the salivary glands. So it actually falls under the category of the digestive glands, but I thought we'll finish it off here itself, because the salivary glands, they actually open up into the buccal cavity. Since they open up into the buccal cavity, all the secretions are poured into the buccal cavity. And anyway, since we have started off with the buccal cavity, so let us finish off with the next part also here, which is the salivary glands. Right. Now let us take up with the salivary glands. Now talking about salivary glands, we have three different types of salivary glands, or there are three pairs of salivary glands which are present in the human system. And these three pairs of salivary gland, all the secretions together, we would actually start calling it as saliva. And this saliva plays an important role in the process of digestion. The fourth one is the salivary gland. So what we do with regards to the salivary gland is, I'll just give you a tabular form so that it will be very easy for you to understand a few things, right? So first what we'll be talking about is the type of gland. So I said there are three pairs of glands which are being present. So let us quickly take up with those. The first pair of gland is called the parotid gland. We call it as the parotid salivary glands. Right. Now this parotid salivary gland is said to be the largest gland of the three pairs what we have. The largest gland of the three pairs is the parotid salivary gland. So next, where exactly do we have this gland? The second part would be, what's the location of this gland? So where do we have this parotid gland, parotid salivary gland being present? So parotid salivary gland is actually present in the cheek region, right below the ear lobe. So we have the pinna, the ear lobe. So right below the ear lobe, on either sides in the cheek region, we would have this parotid salivary gland being present. So we can take down the location of it. Location, it is present beneath the ear lobe in the cheek region. So that is the location of the parotid salivary gland. Now, there are all of these salivary glands, we know that they are said to be exocrine in nature. Right? We know what is an exocrine gland. So the gland which have ducts and all the secretions are poured into those ducts, we would start calling it as the exocrine gland. Now from each of the pair of salivary gland also, there are some ducts which actually arise. So you need to remember those ducts, important one, right? So the duct which arises from the parotid salivary gland is called as the Stenson's duct. Right? It is called as the Stenson's duct. So Stenson's duct is the one which would arise from the parotid salivary gland. Now, where does this Stenson's gland actually open up? Right? Where does it open? So it arises from the parotid salivary gland, and where do it open? It actually opens up in the buccal cavity. In the buccal cavity also, what is the exact location where the parotid salivary gland or the Stenson's duct actually open? So Stenson's duct, it would actually open up below, right? It would open up below the second molar, right? It would open up below the second molar of the upper jaw. right? It would open up below the second molar of the upper jaw. So in the upper jaw, we have the second molar being present. So right below the second molar or at the base of the second molar, the stencils duct actually open. Right. Then, what is the secretion of the parotid gland? What does the parotid gland actually secrete? Parotid gland gives out some sort of serous secretions. Right? This type of secretions here by the parotid gland is called as the serous secretion. Now, what does this mean? Serous secretion? Serous secretion is nothing but secretion of water plus the enzyme. Right? So water and enzyme together, we would start calling it as serous secretion. And there is only one enzyme which is being secreted by it, and that enzyme is called as salivary amylase, or we would also start calling it as the ptyalin enzyme. Right? So this is the first thing what we have with regards to the parotid salivary gland. So parotid salivary gland, location beneath the earlobe in the cheek region. Then the duct which arises from it, it is called the Stenson's duct. And where exactly does the Stenson's duct open? Below the second molar of the upper jaw. And the type of secretion we will start calling it as serous secretion, because there is water as well as the enzymes being secreted. Right. So this is the first gland what we have. The second gland what we have, and this is the largest gland what we have. And one more important thing here with regards to the parotid gland. Sometimes there is inflammation of the parotid gland happening. As a result of which the entire cheek region would be swollen. Right. So that inflammation is caused because of a viral infection. And that virus is nothing but mumps virus, leading to a condition called as mumps. Right. So mumps is nothing but a viral infection caused by mumps virus, which would start infecting the parotid salivary gland, leading to the inflammation of the parotid salivary gland, which we start calling it as mumps. Okay. The second gland what we have is called submandibular. It is called submandibular, or we also call it as submaxillary salivary gland. This is the second one, submandibular or the submaxillary salivary gland. Now, what is the location of this submandibular or submaxillary salivary gland? So, the submandibular salivary gland is actually located at the jaw angle. Right? It is located at the jaw angle. So there is an angle between the jaw. So we have the cheek arising. From there, we have the lower mandibles being present. So there is some sort of angle. So it comes down like this and it turns like this. So at the angle of the cheekbone as well as the mandible, there exactly there we would have the submandibular or the submaxillary salivary gland being present. Now the duct that would arise from the submaxillary gland, it is called as the Wharton's duct. It is called the Wharton's duct. Now, where exactly does this Wharton's duct actually open? So, Wharton's duct would actually open below the incisors, of the lower jaw. So, in the lower jaw, we have the incisors. So right below the incisors or at the base of the incisors of the lower jaw, we have the Wharton's duct actually opening. Now, what is the secretions of the submandibular gland? The type of secretion here, it is called as the mucus secretion. Right? So where they would actually start secreting something called as mucin. Right? So mucin is being secreted there. So this is the second gland what we have, which is called the submandibular gland. The third gland what we have in the list is called as the sublingual gland. Sublingual. Now this sublingual salivary gland is said to be the smallest of all the three glands what we have. Right? It is said to be the smallest of all the three glands that we have. Now location, from the name itself we can make out sublingual. That means it is present beneath the tongue. It is present beneath the tongue. So this is the location of the sublingual salivary gland, which is present beneath the tongue. Now the duct which arises from the sublingual salivary gland, it is called as the duct of Rivinus, or it is also called, there is one more name given for it, or it is also called as Bartholin's duct. Bartholin's duct, or it is called the duct of Rivinus, or the Bartholin's duct. Now, where does this duct open? So, the Bartholin's duct or the duct of Rivinus, it would again open below the tongue. would open again below the ducts. And the type of secretion of this sublingual gland, it is again said to be the mucus secretion, where they would start secreting mucin. Right, they will start secreting the mucin. Right, so these are the three different types of glands that are present: parotid gland, the submandibular or the submaxillary gland, as well as the sublingual gland. So the different types of glands, what are present? The location where the glands are being present, the ducts which would arise from each of the glands, where do the ducts actually open, and finally the secretions of all of these glands. Now quickly let us take up the last part, which is the composition of saliva. Now we're talking about the composition of saliva. What all does the saliva actually contain? So we have written down a few secretions of all of these three glands, right? So the saliva would contain water, right? And it also has the enzyme. Now there is only one enzyme, as I said. So when we say enzyme, there is one enzyme which is called as the salivary amylase being present. Right, and the salivary amylase, there is one more name given for it. It is also called as xylem, or we start calling it as the salivary amylase. Right. Along with the enzymes, there is also mucus being secreted. There is mucus being secreted, and along with this, saliva also consists of certain salts, some ions. And along with that, there is another substance which is being present, which is called the bactericidal substance, which is called as the lysozyme. Right. Now, this lysozyme is a bactericidal enzyme. It's called the bactericidal in nature. So it is responsible for bringing about the destruction of the bacteria, which would actually enter into the buccal cavity through the food that we actually eat. So this is what we have in the composition of the saliva. Now, what is the pH of saliva? So the pH would be around, so pH of saliva would be around 6.8. So this is the pH of saliva, 6.8. And then talking about the volume of saliva, so every day there is approximately 1 to 2 liters of saliva being secreted by these three glands, that is the parotid, submandibular, as well as the sublingual gland, every day in the buccal cavity. Right? So this is what we have in the composition of saliva. So with this, we have done with the first part of the alimentary canal, which is called as the buccal cavity, right? So in the next session, let us take up with the next part, which is called as the pharynx. So the food that we eat from the buccal cavity will now move on into the next region, which is called as pharynx, right? So in the next session, let us take up with the next part, which is called as pharynx, right? Thank you.